Most countries have a presidential palace. Until the late 20th century, building a palace for the king of a country was an essential element of the capitalist concept of class status. One of the main ways in which rulers impose power and exploit by managing symbolic capital. The nation-state thus destroy its institutions and manage symbolic capital. Symbolic capital is the symbols that represent the economic and cultural capital of the rulers. These symbols make the masses' consciousness accept wealth and comfort as the natural rights of the rulers. It's precisely through these symbols that the difference and hierarchical barrier between the masses and themselves is established. The fact that a minority live in extreme luxury and have material power is natural to many people and it's not questioned. It's assumed that this inequality is the law of nature. Unlike its usual style, Yule Verne's Master Zacharias has an ancient dimension. The narrative progresses with the collapse of Master Zacharias, the creator of perfect clocks, due to his arrogance after one of his inventions and the grandiosity complex brought about by fame. This cautionary tale reminds us that whatever our achievements, we cannot see ourselves as more significant than the totality of being. From time to time, one has to remember and feel that existence is more significant than oneself. This is good for consciousness. On the contrary, the palace is, among other semiological meanings, a sharp reminder of the leader's arrogance. Associated with the symbolical capital of the ruling classes and the immortality of the cult of the leader, the palace is a powerful symbol of power and its potential collapse. The palace is one of the most significant forces of this symbolic capital. It's like symbolizing the class-based foundation of the nation-state. The understanding of palace, inherited from empires to nation-states, is one of the many phenomena that prevent the equality of people from being questioned. The sentence, the king, the president, the pharaoh must have a palace and this is natural, is not questioned by many people. The fact that masses don't question it has to do with their idealization of the state and their feeling of powerlessness. The masses must feel powerless so that the system continues functioning this way. This feeling of powerlessness must be ingrained in each subject. It must be assumed to be as natural as the water in the aquarium they were born in. Their powerlessness and the superiority of the rulers must be instilled in each subject. Many palaces have been built in nation-states around the world. Some date back to the empire on which the nation-state was founded. The Casa Rosada Palace in Argentina was built in the name of Juan de Garay, the Spanish governor, who was a pioneer in the colonization of South America and the massacre of its people. The massacre of the peoples of Latin America by the capitalists and the building of palaces for them is unfortunately quite commonplace in the history of civilization. This proves that almost all of today's places are built with the same blood and dirty trade. We still don't understand what is dirty. The teaching of history propagates a myth of the nation in praise of nation-states, which unfortunately cannot be seen or known by the masses. Later on, we will do a video on the school of Annales and its understanding of history, and we will talk about a school that brought enlightenment to history. We will remember Fernand Braudel together. When we come back to the point of palaces, the Soviet Union also has a record in this regard. The fact that the Soviet Union was communist didn't change the fact that it was an apparatus of exploitation. It was not significantly different from other states in this regard about palaces. The Grand Kremlin Palace was built in the 14th century for the Tsars, the representatives of a family that exploited the people. It was designed for the Tsar in whom the ruling classes were embodied. After the Soviet Revolution, the palace wasn't turned into a museum. Instead, it was used as the headquarters of Communist Party members and as a state representation. The High Council members of the Soviet one-party system replaced the Tsar's subjects. Let us recall George Orwell's Animal Farm. The palace demonstrates the Communist Party's sovereignty over the people that make up the country. The Communist Party of the Soviet Union certainly didn't represent the working class, as some claim. Because the Bolsheviks had taken the revolution from the people and were Jacobins. What's the word Jacobin? In the shortest form, it is an elitist structure based on the motto, for the people against the people. Leaders and vanguard groups hold the right to decide for the masses. The right to decide is seen in the founding groups of nation-states. Moreover, they often take this right by force. The typical characteristic of state founders is that they are Jacobins. In the Soviet Union, over time, entire peoples became apolitical and excluded from politics. Workers' councils were appointed from the center. The communist state reached such a point that, when it collapsed in 1991, the people didn't even claim the state. They didn't fully understand what had happened because they were far from the government. The White House is the most important of the many official buildings in Washington, the federal capital of the United States. George Washington, the United States' first president, located the capital and had plans drawn up. However, he died in 1799 without residing in the newly established capital. A year after his death, the presidential building was inaugurated. The building was painted white from top to bottom. U.S. presidents since John Adams have lived here. In the beginning, some presidents were really philosophers, but soon presidents became puppets of capitalism, like all over the world. These presidents propagandize the myth of freedom. But some are freer than others, because under capitalism, freedom is also bought. The millions selling their labor and time to the system lack access to health insurance. Even health insurance is open to corporate fraud. The White House symbolizes this unequal system and the delusion that it has the right to exploit the whole world. Let us imagine that the state reputation is genuine and not a false myth. Today, reputation is determined by whether or not it respects human rights and universal law. It is determined by whether or not you protect the right to life of others. Your dignity is determined by whether or not you protect each other's rights even though you live with others within yourself. The United States, Guantanamo camp, the Soviet Union's 1930 Gulag prisons, Turkey's 1980 Diyarbakir prison, Georgia's Vidani prison, and many other torture centers are the measure of your dignity. There is no dignity with torture and oppression. What is the reputation of the state of Israel today? No matter what they do, their reputation will be the same as Adolf Hitler's for decades to come. Opposing the system of exploitation and the number of people who oppose all forms of exploitation determines your reputation. Today, it's not the palaces that determine dignity. In a country with no prisoners convicted of intellectual crimes, journalists are not imprisoned, and people live freely with all kinds of identities, we can discuss dignity. The palaces of states don't produce prestige as in the medieval mentality. There is no dignity if there is no egalitarian order among people. The right to criticize the rulers can raise your reputation. No dignity exists in a country where you cannot name the rulers. Religion and faith for the people, palaces, inns and baths for themselves. However, prophets rejected palaces. A person who doesn't see the poverty of his own life and is proud of the pomp and luxury of a group of wealthy people is a person who is enslaved and legitimizes his slavery. The palace needs powerless minds from the archaic times of empires. Human dignity is a feeling that requires people to be free and equal and not to idealize any power. People who lose this feeling and submit to a group of ruling minorities are not citizens but people who willingly accept enslavement, and palaces are the symbols of these people. We have come to the end of another video. What do you think about the palaces? Please indicate in the comments. Do you have palaces in your country? Are you comfortable talking about them? Or do you live under an enslaving government? How aware are you of this situation? Or is it typical for you? Thank you all. Finally, let's end with this sentence.